G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to War Thunder. Today we're going to have a look at the Meteor Mk8, and in this battle I pull off some pretty nice stuff. As you can see, I'm in a bit of a down tier. We start about halfway through the battle because that's when my recording starts, and everything seems to be going to shit. This game ends up being a victory for us, and it's a bit of a carry. So I'll let that pan out a little bit. But for now, I'd just like to quickly talk about what's going on in the channel. So recently we hit 5,000 subscribers, and honestly I couldn't be happier. It's quite a milestone, and if you think about it, 10k is the next milestone, and that's a bit of a scary thought, you know. A year ago I had 1,500 subs, maybe barely on 2,000, and now a year later we're at 5k, and you know, that's a big number. So thanks for all joining in on the ride, I guess. Anyway, let's talk about the Meteor Mk8 a little bit. Currently it sits at 8.0. It's fairly decent as an 8.0, but as soon as you start to fight 9.0s, CL13s, more specifically the Sabres, you start to lose out a little bit because it just can't really keep up. I mean, it's good, it's maneuverable, it's responsive, it has good enough guns, I guess, if you get enough gun time. The Hispanos are a bit of a letdown, but it could be a lot worse. You could have Japanese 30 mils. Well, I would consider Hispanos to be one of the worst armaments at top tier, even more so than the NS-23s. I actually quite like the NS-23s. They work really well for low-speed dogfights. Hispanos, you need a fair bit of gun time. And unfortunately, whilst the Meteor Mk8 has that mobility to pull onto enemies, it lacks speed and it lacks energy retention. So you can't really pitch up for a CL13 that's going 1,000 kilometers an hour when you top out at about 950. And if you combine the two stats, energy retention and speed, a CL13 will outdo you in every way. Even a MiG-15 BIS will start to pull with you because it can just reach a speed that's higher than you, significantly so. And as a result, you really just can't keep up. That's why, in a down tier, the Meteor is a lot better. Because it just has a lot more going for it. It's fighting a much weaker opponent. Even so much as the LA-15, you could say the G91. Because the G91 lacks, whilst it turns very well at higher speeds, it lacks that low speed turning. And that's where the Meteor excels. It also has quite significant acceleration. I haven't even spaded the Meteor Mk8, and the acceleration is already proving at low speed to be really, really good. So much so that it can almost challenge the G91 in a rolling scissors, energy-wise. If you use your air brakes, flaps, and even throttle correctly, as well as your maneuvering, you can outturn a 163, and you can get a 163 to overshoot, which I do in this video. So the Meteor Mk8 isn't too bad in the 8.0 meta. In the 7.0 meta, it clubs because it's facing 262s that accelerate very poorly, maneuver very poorly, but have great guns. So if you can catch a 262A on low energy, slow, and below you, you've pretty much got it made for you. Other things you got to consider at that tier are Yak 30s, Yak 23s. The Yak 30 is basically in the same case as the LA-15, where you can turn fight it, but you've got to be careful because they can easily out-accelerate you, out-energy you, if you put yourself in the wrong position. So if you're on equal energy, what you don't want to do is kill that energy. You want to avoid air braking because you can pull inside. with flaps and still maintain enough energy. Whereas the LA-15 would have to air brake and use flaps. And that's where you could catch them off on their low energy. Because whilst the LA-15 and the Yak-30 accelerate reasonably well, you will beat them. And you have that maneuverability, especially with that rudder. You can use that rudder extremely effectively. It is extremely responsive to lock onto an enemy's 6 and just fire away with those Hispanos. And you may not get a kill. You may just get a crit. But that'll be enough for you to win the dogfight. Especially in jets, where jets do not take damage as easily. In this case here, I'm up against a C2B, which happens to be flown by Fumble Squid. If you see him in game, tell him I said hi. He's a really, really nice guy. A 163, an Arado, a Horton, and I think an A series 262. Now here I go in this fight with the ME163. I'm taking him into the vertical because I know that he'll shut off his throttle and he'll overshoot because he has way better energy retention than me. Pop my air brakes and flaps, retract them really quickly, and there we go, he's overshot. Now he's ahead of me, and because he dropped his throttle, he doesn't have the energy to pull away, and so I get a really easy kill on him. That does leave me vulnerable to enemies like the 262 C2B, but the C2B decided to go for the B57 on the runway. Now, I got off lucky there. That was a 1v1, but that 163 made a critical error by reducing his throttle. He shouldn't engage in vertical fights and cut his throttle at the same time, because the 163 works with extremely good energy retention and good maneuverability at medium speeds. As you get to low speeds, without that acceleration, it starts to fall apart. So if you can control your speed, which the Meteor is decent at, better so than the 163, you can make them overshoot quite easily. I wouldn't be terribly scared of a 163 given that you have enough energy. If you're put on low energy and a 163 is above you with higher energy, keeping their energy, boom and zooming you, you're pretty much screwed. But if you can get them into a 1v1 and get them into a rolling scissors like that, you can quite easily take them out. Now, I can see this 262 is going for ground targets, and I can see that there is something going for those ground targets in that general direction by spotting the dot. I head for that because I know that's probably an easy kill, and that will also bring any other enemies over towards them. So what I want is a fight, essentially. I'm just itching for a bit of a dogfight. I can see that 262 is approaching me. I go for the Horton, because the Horton is closest, quite simply. And in fact, I'm more scared of the Horton, because it has the energy retention. That shot there was a bit deceiving, because I get a couple of hits, but a Horton really can't take damage, and when you put a Horton into a low-speed maneuver, and you damage it, you get a really easy kill. Let's just say that. Now, here I'm putting the superior energy retention of the 262, the Meteor, to good use, and making that 262 play the horizontal, because I know that I can win the vertical, and he will never win the horizontal. Because I simply just have better speed than him, better energy, and what do you know? I also have better maneuverability too. That spark was the first time I have sparked in War Thunder in about 6 months. I had a really good run until today. I just didn't get any sparks. And yeah, that's 4 kills. Quite simple. Personally, I like the 262. Sorry, the Mark 8. I don't like the 262. The C2B, yes, but the others, no. They're just not my style. The Mark 8 Meteor is quite nice. It's quite nice when you're not facing CLs. The problem is, a CL-13 will damage your wing, and any internal wing damage on a Meteor, ooh, you'll have a hard time fighting. It just throws off everything. And it sucks. But there's not much you can do about that apart from hobble back to base, and when you're hobbling back to base at 400 to 600 kilometers per hour, you become quite a vulnerable target. And that's where you tend to get killed. That or by a lucky deflection shot by a CL. Because sometimes the way you maneuver happens to put yourself into their guns. That happens to a lot of Spitfire pilots, I notice. They'll go head on with a Bf 109. They'll pull off, and they'll keep pulling off so much that they end up doing a good half a circle rather than a quarter circle. And that half circle gives the 109 enough distance to deflect well enough onto the Spitfire, and you get yourself a really easy kill as a 109 pilot. And it's also a little bit easy to predict that. So you got to watch that when you're flying planes that are very maneuverable, that you don't over maneuver. It's a bit of an art, and you've got to get used to it. And that'll only come with practice. But that's one of the challenges, I guess, that people face when they're flying Spitfires. I might make a video on that a little bit later. But anyway, one more thing I'd like to discuss about the Meteor is fuel loads. Take minimum fuel on every map except Spain. Because Spain is a much larger map, and you're just not going to make full use of that 8 minutes, because there's just too much space and too much distance to cover where you need that 8 minutes of fuel. It's good for performance, but you need that longevity. You need that endurance. And whilst you've got enough ammo, you've got enough maneuverability, you've got a decent climb rate, that fuel load is probably the one thing that happens to hold it back. Personally, I'd love it if the Meteor would have a 15-minute fuel load, or alternatively, we had a slider where we could, say, take a certain amount of fuel up to the maximum, which might be an hour or 50 minutes or 27 minutes or whatever. But in the menu, as we check our loadouts and whatnot, we can choose how much fuel, and say maybe for the 163 and the Kai 200 it'll be full, and that's all you can do, because as far as I understand it, in real life that's what they could do. But other planes that run on petroleum, gasoline, I'm not sure if there are any diesel powered planes. That's one thing I don't think so. But like all the others, so just general props and jets rather than rocket powered planes, could take like a slider. And that would be really good, because you could figure out what is the best amount of fuel for each tier, for example. So instead of taking 8 minutes of fuel, you could take 15 or 12 or 13 minutes of fuel, depending on your map as well. And you could compensate for roughly how much you think you might need. And I think that'd be a really, really nice little feature to add. But maybe it's just wishful thinking. Anyway, the last kill I get, I'll show you. It's just a kill on an Arado. I'm using boom and zoom tactics. I'm making sure I keep my speed, making sure I don't bleed my energy, putting that decent energy retention to use, especially against an Arado, which takes a while to accelerate. He decides to turn back for his airfield, and I just clap him before he can get a chance to go back. And that's a 5-kill game. That was my first ARB game in a while, because I'd been playing a lot of tanks. And I had just come back from a couple-day break from War Thunder. I guess I was had a bit of stress in real life, and it tended to show when I was playing, particularly being salty and pretty nasty in chat. But yeah, take a quick break and get back into it, and it's really good. I'm playing well, and everything seems to be okay now. But yeah, Meteor Mk8. It's a good plane. If you're looking for something that's not quite 9.0, but still quite good, with a decent chance, decent competitiveness, reasonable amount of down tiers, the Meteor Mk8 is quite a way to go. I would even say that it could potentially compete with the G91. But that's a discussion for another day. Anyway, ladies and gents, thanks for 5.4k subs. Thanks for everything. And take care. And I'll catch you next time.